Welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Steve Leibowitz. Yes, folks, it's now more than 100 days since we awoke on Simchat Torah, holiday morning on Saturday, October 7th, to the news that Israel was not as invincible as we believed. Under a massive hail of rocket fire, thousands of Hamas terrorists crossed our seemingly impenetrable border in numerous places on October 7th and proceeded to attack IDF bases, kibbutzim, towns and villages, murdering men, women and children and killing hundreds of outnumbered soldiers and local security teams. Several communities were burned in the worst day in national history. It took several days for the attack inside Israel to be neutralized and for the scope of the security failure to be understood. Hundreds were butchered at the massacre at the rave festival. In total, over 1,200 dead and some 230 taken hostage to Gaza. The snapback was impressive and unprecedented. Reservists, hearing the news, left their families and headed straight to the front. More reservists than needed reported to duty within days. The nation pulled together like never before. We turned things around, organized our forces, I mean all of our forces, IDF and civilian. Our people made up for our government shortcomings, and we stood united, ready to destroy Hamas, whatever it takes. 20 days into the war, the ground operation began in northern Gaza. The IDF made progress in destroying Hamas, but after 80 days of operations, Hamas leadership is still functioning in and under Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. 100-plus days after October 7th, and international pressure is building on Israel to bring the war to an end. Families of the 136 hostages remaining in captivity are putting agonizing pressure on leadership to bring their loved ones home at any price. We Israelis are emotionally drained, exposed daily to horror stories from captivity and the heartbreaking stories of the fallen. The end is not in sight. Yes, the fighting in Gaza is now in what we are calling the third stage, but there is no date for an end to the war or a direction for the day after or a realistic date for residents of the Gaza border and also the northern border with Lebanon to return to their homes in security. And to top off the 100 days of misery, we had South Africa take Israel to the High Court of Justice in The Hague to face charges of genocide. The victim had been turned into the aggressor. And after my depressing rant, we are fortunate to be joined by two guests who may sound more optimistic. Professor Yedidia Stern heads the Jewish People's Policy Institute and joins us from Jerusalem, and Jerusalem Deputy Mayor and Special Israeli Envoy Flor Hassan Nachum joins us from Madrid. Flor, I'd like to start with you. I know that you are currently on an important mission relating to explaining Israeli war policy. How's it going? Or maybe I should say, do you remember a time that we have ever been unjustly more hated?
Well, if we look back for a few thousand years, I'm sure that we can find many times that we were hated. But I think in our generation, in the modern era, certainly in the history of the modern state of Israel, I think that we are at a point where everything is coming at us from so many different directions. As you mentioned, we have part of it is the ICJ, but I've been dealing just simply with public diplomacy and seeing how the world forgot very quickly that October 7th ever happened. And even the people who do admit and can acknowledge that something terrible happened on October 7th, when you see the people and the marchers on the street, somehow they found justification for killing of babies and raping of women and kidnapping the elderly. And to me, that is just the re-emergence of an age-old hatred, the oldest hatred in the world, which is anti-Semitism. And as Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs said once so eloquently, you know, anti-Semitism is a mutating virus, and every 100 years or 200 years or whenever it pops its head in the worst of ways, it cloaks itself in the scapegoatism of the day. And, you know, we've seen it as a religious hatred when we were Christ killers 500 years ago. My own family was kicked out of Spain under those circumstances. And then we saw it 100 years ago, of course, with Hitler and that fascism of white supremacy. When the world is against communists, Jews are communists. When the world is against capitalists, Jews are capitalists. And today, in this post-colonial world, somehow, even though we came back to our land after 2,500 years, we're the colonizers. And so everything gets warped. And that's what we're seeing, a mixture of ignorance and hatred around the world, with a media that gives us absolutely no empathy, and and countries that are actively against us. But we have to always recognize that behind all of this is the evil axis that Iran is puppeteering in the region and around the world.
All right, let me turn to you, Professor Stern. You head the Jewish People Policy Institute, and in the latest monthly Israeli Society Index put out by the JPPI, the findings found that the U.S. government and the Israeli civilian population are completely at odds over what must be happening in this war. Can you explain, do the findings show some kind of a widening gap in expectations?
Yes, you're right. The JPPI index shows us that the Israelis do not agree with the main goals of American diplomacy right now concerning what's going on here. For example, talking about the future of Gaza. We know that the Biden administration is telling us, well, the day after the war, the place should be run by the Palestinian authorities, upgraded, changed, whatever, renewed. Israelis do not agree. The numbers are, and this is something that we came up with only 3-4 days ago, so it's very up to date. 36% of Israelis believe that Israel should maintain control over Gaza Strip for good. This is not a small part. 44% say, well, we agree that it may go back to the Palestinians, but not the Palestinian Authority, which is corrupted and unreliable, et cetera, but we need to create a new kind of ruling sector in the Palestinian society, but security should be always under our control, even after we'll give back the control of the place to the Palestinians. Only 5%, Steve, only 5% agree to bring back the Palestinian Authority to Gaza. So this is a huge gap. Also regarding the north, the Hezbollah situation. Right now, 44% of the Jews in Israel say
Professor Stern, my next question of you is going to be about the Hezbollah specifically, so if we could, we'll wait for that. Fleur, I wanted to go back to those poll numbers that Professor Stern just mentioned. Only 5% of the Jewish Israelis believe with the American proposal that the Palestinian Authority should control Gaza with other Palestinian leadership. 36% believe that Israel should establish control over the entire Gaza Strip. 26% want to rebuild settlements in the Gush Katif with Gaza. Where is the Israeli government fit in here, Fleur?
I'm not sure they've made up their minds yet. I'm not sure that they're thinking about the day after, because we're in the middle of a war and it's very difficult to see. But I certainly agree with the majority of the Israeli public. How on earth do we want to give the Palestinian Authority control of the Gaza Strip when they can't even control Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, where they have authority to control? I don't understand what the American government is thinking if they think that all of a sudden they're going to become what? Switzerland? They are corrupt. They are paying people to kill Jews through their pension, pay-to-slave policy. They have an insightful curriculum that teaches hatred against Jews and the state of Israel and the media. And essentially, they've been lying to their people for 75 years when they keep telling them, and they tell them at every opportunity, just hang on in there. We're going to kick out the Jews at some point. And so there's no education, and from what I can see, there's no preparation of the population for any type of peaceful resolution of sharing this land. And so why take, in Hebrew there's an expression, mita chola, why take a sick bed and put it somewhere else, which is bigger and even more complicated? I think we have to consider some type of international force. I think it would be very beneficial to bring in the Abraham Accords countries, for example, Saudi Arabia, who is dying to make a defense pact deal with the United States, the UAE. These are countries that know how to deal with Muslim fundamentalists, and they're countries who have a lot of resources to be able to help with the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip. And of course, Israel has to maintain some type of security watch in some way on the Gaza Strip. So for the most part, I think people are commonsensical when they say the Palestinian Authority are simply not able to do this.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
Professor Stern, I said we would come back to Hezbollah about the question of opening a second front with Hezbollah. 44% of Jewish Israeli public believes that Israel should open a second front against Hezbollah as soon as possible. Again, of course, the American government doesn't agree and wants to prevent a wider war. How long can we have the population living outside of their homes on the northern border without a move being made militarily?
Well, we cannot, obviously. And we all agree, I think all Israelis will agree, that we cannot go back to the status quo before Simchat Torah, before the war started. It's too dangerous for our people. We cannot trust that the same will not happen in the north. So something has to be solved. Either the Hezbollah will retreat with some kind of agreement, which, if you ask me, I don't think will happen so easily. And if not, yes, I join I think majority of Israelis who say we have to take initiative. The question is when, how. I mean, there are many questions how to do it, but we cannot afford to leave the situation as it is. We have to realize that we're talking about not a small issue. We're talking about the existence of the state of Israel. If right now, either in Gaza Strip or in the north, Israel will retreat because of the hostages situation or because of diplomatic pressure or because of the Hague delivery, the decrees, whatever it is, if we retreat and will not definitely win, this will erode our deterrence, which is the most important component of the security of the state of Israel in the neighborhood we are in. We cannot afford not to win. That's why I think Israelis with good senses are saying, well, we have to finish the issue with the Hezbollah. If not today, then tomorrow. But we cannot go on this way, and I do agree.
Fleur, among coalition supporters, the percentage that believe that Hezbollah must be pushed back rises to 60%. Israeli Jews have been forced out of their homes now for more than 3 months. Don't you believe that Hezbollah needs to be pushed back already? What is the government waiting for?
Well, I have to say that a lot of those evacuees are in Jerusalem. We've taken in tens of thousands of evacuees. The majority are from the north. The number is between 35 and 50,000 evacuees, and many of our hotels are filled in the cities with evacuees from the north. So I understand acutely the problem that nobody's giving them any type of, plan or horizon of when they can go home, and this is an intolerable situation. We need to push them back to their agreement, to beyond back from the river. They've been creeping up and creeping up and creeping up, exactly the same way that we allowed Hamas to send rockets for 15 years without pushing them back from the get-go. We did the same thing with Hezbollah, letting them creep up to the border in contravention of the agreements. And so I think that the only thing the Israeli government is waiting for is finishing the job with Hamas and waiting for the summer so that it's easier to fight a war in the north.
Professor Stern, the U.S. is a close friend of Israel, and without its support, Israel would find itself very hard-pressed for military and political support. But Israel has security needs, and after the dramatic shattering of our borders on October 7th, on the Gaza border and also on the Lebanese border, wherein lies the solution? Take your pick on which border. Where's the solutions coming from?
Well, I believe, as I said earlier, that first of all, we have to go all the way in Gaza, not to stop in the middle. Unfortunately, more and more Israelis are saying, what's the purpose of it? Let's have the hostages back. Obviously, we all want the hostages back, but the most important part is national security. And national security should be secured by winning the war in Gaza. Once we win the war, and by the way, winning the war does not necessarily mean killing a specific individual like Sinwar. He might be escaping. That's okay. I mean, it's not okay. I would like him to be dead, but that's not the definition of victory. Victory means that there is no Hamas as a ruling power next to our border in Gaza. We have to determine. Later on, I believe that Israel should not stay there. We do not want to take responsibility on more than 2 million people. It's not our business. I think we have to find a way to bring in, as Flair said, outside forces who are more moderate, who can cooperate with us, give some kind of horizon to the Hamas people. I want to tell you, my son came last night from Gaza for 2 days. I asked him, how do you feel, what's going on? He told me, listen, it's unbelievable. Wherever we go, every private home, we see weapons, we see pictures of Al-Aqsa, we see slogans against Israel. This is everywhere. It's not just an army. This is a nation who hates us. So we cannot give in to any in-between solution. We have to finish the job. And later on, I think Hezbollah should be learned a lesson. We have to be forceful. We have to go out. I know it's tough when the Americans are not necessarily with us all the way, but this is our life. This is our national life. This is the future of kids. We don't have any other option but to win. Hopefully, Biden understands it. We have to be sensitive to his needs. This is an election year, and he needs to be reelected. So we have to be smart. We don't have to push him. We don't have to declare things. We have to maintain a warm relationship. Obviously, he's a Zionist. We all know it. So we have to find a way not to push him too much, but to achieve our national goals. And I would like to say something political. Right now, we have a unity government, at least partially unity government. It's crucial that this will stay for the future, till we finish the job. I'm afraid that the tensions in Israel will push Gantz and his party outside of the government, and I really, really believe it will not happen, because we have to see the general good of the people, and this is winning the war on both ends.
Professor, I hear you, but let me ask Fleur this. Everywhere I go, and we know a lot of the same people, I speak to very pro-Israel people who want to win the war, but they also say that Israel needs to change political leadership as soon as possible. That's what I'm hearing from friends at home and abroad. Am I just talking to the wrong people?
No, absolutely. I think after the devastation of what's happened, and after the fact that apparently, obviously, certain policies that were adopted, and I think that it would have been the same for any government. I don't think that Netanyahu did anything that anybody else wouldn't have done in terms of Hamas. We had a wrong conception. We thought we could buy peace with these genocidal maniacs. And I think that what the country needs to let out the frustrations from what's happened is an election. And then people can choose. Now, not in the middle of a war. You don't change horses midstream. But I think that once we've settled the issue in the north and the issue in the south, if it's possible to do it within a year, we should certainly go out and have an election, and then the people can choose and the people can talk.
Just want to add, Steve, that the JPI index, we asked the people do you have trust in the prime minister? And it's only 30%. In times of a war, vote is only 30%. This is very, very low, obviously.
Obviously, we also don't like to criticize the prime minister in the middle of the war. Professor Stern, before we run out of time, I want to ask you this. During wars, diplomatic agreements emerge. At the end of the war, it happened in Israel after the 73 war. Eventually came the peace agreement with Egypt 5 years later. First and Second Lebanon War ended with agreements including UN Resolution 1701, which is currently being ignored. Can you envision a positive diplomatic outcome from the current war down the road? I need to finish with some kind of vision of hope.
Okay, you're talking to the right person. I'm optimistic by nature, and hopefully also using the facts to be optimistic. Listen, Hamas and fundamentalist Islam is a threat not only to Israel. It's a threat to many of our neighbors. They may not like us in Egypt and in Jordan, but they know that if Hamas will take over their places, they are doomed. The same with parts of Europe. They're still in illusion that they can contain, so to speak, a multicultural way of thinking on the future. No. Fundamentalists in Islam want it all. They prove that they're willing to die. And as much as they are willing to die in Gaza, they are willing to die elsewhere. This is an ideology that threatens the world. Now it's up to us and our friends to show the world, this is pretty much clear, that we are not alone. They are with us in the same boat. See what's happening in the sea next to Yemen. I mean, do you need more proofs? It's unfortunate, but I think the hyper-fascists in Europe are gaining power because the center is not understanding this. If the center sectors in Europe and also in America eventually will understand the threat as we experience it, I think we may have alliances with majority of the world against this kind of force, and we have to work on it. This is our future.
From Madrid, Fleur, any last word, about 30 seconds, any words of optimism from Madrid about how things are going for us?
Well, I 100% agree with Professor Stern, and I'm here to tell the Spanish government, who have not been very kind to Israel after October 7th, to say to them, this is your problem too. And we are fighting a civilizational battle, just like the world did with Hitler. We're fighting it with Iran, who is funding Islamic fundamentalism, which, as the professor said, is a threat to everyone. And this is going to be my message here in Madrid this week.
Well, I'm feeling better coming out of the discussion than I was coming in, so thank you guys both. That's all the time we have this evening. Thank you to our guests. For more updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv. Our thanks for watching. Let's win the war and bring them home. And shalom from Israel.